Hello, my name is Dylan DeLuca Gaines, and today I am going to be telling the story of Raven Becomes Voracious. It is a Shamshian legend, and this performance is not going to be a part of any other SFSU-affiliated course. It is only a part of THA 451, Storytelling and Folk Literature of Summer 2022. Hope you enjoy the performance. At one time, the world was filled with darkness. At the southern tip of Queen Island, there rested a city named Kungalas. This is where the animals lived. It's also where a chief and a chiefess lived with their young son, Prince Raven. Prince Raven was a curious and adventurous boy, delving into the wrong situations and the wrong places at the wrong time. And his father had to interfere with this many times. And even though, despite his father's efforts, Prince Raven passed away. He was met with illness from an unknown source, and he died. The whole tribe is met with grief and sorrow, and they begin to cut out the intestines of Prince Raven and lay them out on the ground. Then they rest his body on top of a bed of wood, and they do a burning ritual. And the mom wakes up the next morning, the chieftainess, and across the way she sees a living person in the same spot in the corpse of her son. So she's very confused at the sight of this. So she confronts the youth, and he says to her, well, God was starting to get very tired of your crying and wailing, so he made me come back. And the chieftainess is dumbfounded and also extremely happy at the sight of her son, but she's confused at the same time. So she tells the chief, therefore the chief tells the whole town, and then the town is swept with this confusing excitement, but doesn't question it anyway. And so the youth is Prince Raven resurrected. The representation of them taking out his intestines begins to make more sense later. When he comes back, all of the tribes swarm him and they ask him, hey, do you need some food? They offer him a bunch of food. He says, no, I do not want any food. I'm good, I just came back from the dead. It's all good, just leave me alone. And the people are very, very confused again. They would think that someone who was just come back to life would be starving. So he goes to bed, and he wakes up the next morning extremely hungry, really, really hungry, to the point where he is stealing food, oh so politely asking for food, and he's just walking around, give me food, come on, please, anybody got food? Anybody, please, give me food. And upon this just feast of the tribe's provisions, they get absolutely mad at the sight of empty baskets. No fruit, no vegetables, nothing. And so they yell at the chief and they tell him, you have to do something about your son. He's eating our provisions. We don't have any food. We don't have any resources anymore at this point. Please do something about your son. And one thing to keep in mind, that as the boy is devouring everything in his path, he is also growing and growing exponentially in size. And so, fast forward to the end of the story, and the chief and Prince Raven are sitting at a a beach strand. The chief puts out a blanket, a raven blanket specifically, with this big boulder and a bunch of provisions to keep his son satisfied. And in his final send-off for his son, he says something along the lines of, son, I'm very proud of you, and I'm very sorry that there's nothing that I could do to keep you here, but you're getting too big. And he tells him that if he rests on the rock, that he'll be able to sleep. And whenever he needs food, he'll just get back on the blanket and soar through the ocean, hunting for salmon, roe, or trout, anything that he can get. And the final words of the story conclude with the chief naming his son Giant. And to end this performance, I just kind of want to do a semi-analysis of the story. When the chief and the tribe take out Prince Raven's intestines from his stomach, it's a symbolism of hunger, because in having this hollow stomach, coming back into resurrection, he doesn't necessarily feel hungry. And that's something that psychologically happens to people when they have gone through extraneous amounts of hunger. There's a stage that you reach where you're not hungry, and then there's the ensuing stage of starvation, of absolute starvation. And that is what Prince Raven experiences. Therefore, he cannot do anything but eat all the provisions in the tribe. And yeah, I think him becoming a giant at the end is also really wholesome. He goes from being very small to being very big from an unexpected tragedy regarding hunger. And I implore anybody that has watched this performance to look up something about the story or look up the story itself. I didn't give the best interpretation of it, but I did my best. So I think that's all that matters. Anyways, hope you enjoyed my performance. Have a good rest of your summer, guys.